They say debt is common, and statistically, it's true. The total amount of American consumer debt is a scary high number, like 13.5 trillion high. That includes all kinds of debt: mortgages, auto loans, credit cards, student loans, and more. But not all debt is the same. Some kinds are bad, some kinds are less bad, some kinds are actually even considered good. Let's break it down. The most common kinds of debt are student loans to pay for education, mortgages to pay for housing, auto loans to pay for cars, and credit card balances to pay for the day-to-day stuff and cover bills. When you go into debt, it means you're borrowing money from a third party, usually for a predefined period of time. When you pay the third party back, you have to pay them more than you actually borrowed as a way of compensating them for using their money. That extra amount is what we call interest. The third party decides how much they want to charge for borrowing their money, and that's what we call the interest rate. Sometimes the interest rate is manageable, so it makes sense to take on the debt. But sometimes the interest rate is outrageously bad, and debt should be avoided at all costs. The interest rate affects the total cost of what you're using the borrowed money to pay for. Let's use a vacation as an example. You decide to make your Paris vacay dreams come true. Your week-long trip costs you $3,000, which you put on a credit card, and it takes you about 1 year to pay it off. Let's assume that the interest rate on that credit card is 20%, which is pretty average. Your $3,000 vacation ends up costing you closer to $3,600. Was eating whole baguettes under the Eiffel Tower really worth the extra $600? Yeah, maybe. Could you have waited to save up for the vacation and avoid paying interest so it only cost you $3,000? Probably. Using a credit card to cover something you can't actually afford to pay for is an example of bad debt. So what's good debt? Generally speaking, it's debt with a lower interest rate that helps you increase your income or your net worth. Like student debt. Let's say you borrow $50,000 to pay for undergrad. The interest rate is 6%. When you graduate, you choose a 10-year repayment period. Over the course of those 10 years, you'll shell out an additional $17,000 in interest, meaning that your degree actually cost you $67,000. That means you'll need to make an extra $67,000 during your working life to make it worth having gone into debt for. We usually consider student debt to be good debt because it helps you get a higher paying job and pays for itself. That being said, the interest does create a hurdle when it comes to breaking even. Without the interest, you would have only had to make an extra $50,000 during your working life to make it worth going into debt for. Obviously, none of us want to have debt, but sometimes we can be a little too casual about it. Maybe because most of us have some, so it doesn't always seem like it's a huge deal. But debt payoff is super important because if you're trying to work towards other financial goals while also carrying debt, you're not getting ahead. It's like taking one step forward and then 2 steps backward. I remember working with someone who had $6,000 in a savings account, which was great, but he also had a $5,000 credit card balance. The idea of using the majority of his savings to pay off his credit card balance seemed crazy to him. He felt like having money in a savings account was the responsible thing to do. But by keeping his money in savings, he was actually losing an additional $1,100 every year to credit card interest, digging himself into a deeper hole. It may feel like a bad idea to use your savings to pay off your debt, but mathematically, it makes way more sense. Get that debt paid off so you can benefit from the full force of your future savings efforts. Mama said it wasn't gonna be easy. Now that we know why it's so important to pay off debt, it's time to discuss how to pay that shit off. Because even if you don't have debt now, you may have it later. And you have way more interesting things to do with your money than to use it for debt. So let's talk about how to get rid of it. First things first, you want to be making the minimum monthly payments on each loan, no matter what. After that, there are 2 main repayment strategies that work regardless of what kind of debt you have: the avalanche method and the snowball method. Consider these strategies when you have more than one kind of debt with different interest rates. The avalanche method is the cheapest way out of debt. This is the method you'll want to use to ensure you're shelling out the least amount of money over the life of your loans. Let's say you have $3,000 of debt on one credit card, $5,000 of debt on another credit card, and a $35,000 student loan. The avalanche method would suggest that after making the minimum monthly payments, put any extra money towards the loan with the highest interest rate. Why? Because that's the debt that's costing you the most. So if your $5,000 credit card balance has a 24% interest rate and your $35,000 student loan has a 5.5% interest rate, you're going to want to focus on the credit card debt first, even though the balance on your student loan is larger. This way, you're focusing on the loan that's costing you the most first. The snowball method is different. The idea is that after paying your monthly minimums, you'll put any extra money towards the loan with the smallest balance first. So if we use the previous example, that means the credit card with the $3,000 balance. Once you have that paid off, you'll move on to the credit card with the $5,000 balance and then the $35,000 student loan. Paying off the smaller debt first means you're able to celebrate paying off a debt in its entirety more frequently. If you want those feelings of accomplishment to motivate you to keep hustling to pay off your debt, go for the snowball method. If you just want the cheapest way out of debt, choose the avalanche method. You might be wondering where the hell you're supposed to find this extra money I keep talking about. It all comes down to how you spend your income, meaning how do you allocate it? When you're carrying debt, specifically credit card debt or student loans, this is typically the breakdown I recommend. 10% of your paycheck should go towards your future, so savings and retirement. 70% of your paycheck should go towards life stuff, both fixed and flexible expenses. This includes everything from your rent or mortgage to your spin studio membership and groceries. And then 20% of your paycheck should go towards paying off your debt. You won't hit these targets overnight, especially if you're living paycheck to paycheck, but there's something to work towards. One of the best times to change your income breakdown is when you get a raise or a new job with a higher salary. Before you spend any of that extra money, see if you can use it to get closer to the 10-70-20 breakdown. Once you pay off that debt, there's a new breakdown you can follow, and it includes an immediate upgrade to your lifestyle. More on that later. I want to say something about engaging with third-party debt consolidation companies or settlement services. More often than not, engaging with these services often results in a hit to your credit score and unwanted tax consequences. If you're committed to paying down your debt, it's better to negotiate directly with your lender, confirm that there won't be any repercussions to your credit score, and then stick to the new repayment schedule you've agreed upon.
Time is money, so spend it wise.
Student loans are a big pain point for our generation. The average high earner has around $80,000 in student loan debt. Student loan debt in the high five and even low six figures is not unheard of. Common? Totally. Don't feel weird about it. A lost cause? Absolutely not. You might feel like your student loan debt is an out of control situation, but I promise it's possible to get it under control. And not just possible, but within reach. But first things first, how you pay off your student loan debt will actually depend on what kind of student loans you have. If you're watching this video, you're probably beyond deciding what kind of student loan is right for you. But if you're not sure whether the loans you do have are federal, private, or a mix, make a quick call or do a quick Google search to figure it out. Basically, federal loans are issued by the government, and usually they come with a lower interest rate. Private loans are issued by a financial institution or a private lender and usually have a higher interest rate. Federal loans are known for their flexibility and repayment options, whereas private loans are usually more restrictive. Got it? Let's get into it. One of the biggest questions facing young professionals with student loan debt is whether to consolidate or refinance. These are very complicated sounding words for what are actually pretty simple concepts, and they often go hand in hand. To consolidate means to take several different loans and to roll them into one single loan. So many future Henrys have more than 10 different student loans, often with multiple providers, each with a different interest rate and payment date. That's a lot to manage. Consolidating your loans means merging multiple loans into one single loan and therefore one single payment obligation, making it just much easier to manage. And how do you do that? By refinancing. Refinancing means applying for a new loan to pay off your existing loan or loans. This allows you to strike a new and improved interest rate or repayment term or both. You could pick a shorter repayment term, allowing you to pay off your loans faster, or you could pick a longer repayment term, which decreases your monthly payment and therefore makes it more manageable. When picking your repayment term, a general rule to remember is that the longer the term, the more time interest has to accumulate, meaning the more you'll pay for your loan in the end. You always want to try to align your monthly repayment amount with the 10-70-20 income breakdown that I talked about earlier, where 20% of your money goes towards paying your debt. And if you start making more money, don't forget to adjust 20% accordingly so that you're increasing the dollar amount that you're putting towards your loans. And just pay that damn thing off faster. Consolidating and refinancing isn't always the way to go though, especially if you have government loans. Government loans offer a lot of benefits that aren't offered by private lenders, like income-based repayment options or deferment or forbearance, where you can temporarily take a break from making payments or temporarily reduce your monthly payment for a certain amount of time. If you refinance or consolidate your government loans with a private lender rather than with the government, you'll lose those benefits. And if you're eligible for loan forgiveness, or if you think you ever may want to put your loan on pause in the future, your government loan will offer you the most flexibility. If you have private loans, refinancing can, in some situations, save you money. Like if your credit score has improved dramatically since graduation, and if you've secured a steady income stream. In that case, you might be eligible for a better interest rate that can keep more money in your pocket. But if you don't feel ready to refinance, there are still other ways to make your student loan payments more manageable. My favorite? Ask your employer if they provide student loan repayment assistance. A lot of companies are rolling this perk into their benefits package. And if your employer doesn't, maybe this benefit is part of your negotiation strategy at work going forward. In the resources section for this chapter, we'll share a few sites and tools to help you navigate whether consolidation or refinancing is right for you. We'll also answer a few key questions such as, what should I do if I miss a payment? Or what if I need to put my loan payment on hold? When you choose to consolidate and refinance, you'll need to pick a new interest rate. You have two options, a fixed interest rate or a variable interest rate. A fixed interest rate is exactly what it sounds like, fixed. It's a set percentage that won't change during your repayment term. As of late, all federal loans are fixed rate loans. If you went to college for 4 years and took out a government loan for each school year, you might graduate with 4 separate loans, each with their own interest rate. If you consolidate them with the government after graduation and refinance, your new interest rate will be a fixed rate that's a weighted average of all those 4 rates. That means your new interest rate could be higher or lower than some of the individual rates on your unconsolidated loans. Had you just left your loans unconsolidated and tackled them with, let's say, the avalanche repayment method that we spoke about earlier, you would pay less overall. That said, consolidating and refinancing are still very important tools. It can make your loans easier to manage so you're less likely to miss a payment or not be able to make a payment at all. Variable rates are the opposite of fixed rates. They change periodically during the term of your loan and can be higher or lower from time to time. When you go to refinance, private lenders will offer you both fixed and variable rate options. It's a good idea to compare rate offers from a few different lenders. Check out the resources section for this chapter for more advice on how to compare. Thinking about the broader economy can also help when you're choosing between a fixed and a variable interest rate. If we're in a low rate environment, it's almost never a bad idea to secure a fixed rate loan. That means you're going to be locking in a low rate, which will be super beneficial to you if rates were to ever go up. Sometimes you might be offered a variable interest rate that comes in lower than the fixed interest rate. And while it might sound appealing at first, it actually could be riskier in the long run. Your rate and your minimum payment will probably go up over time, and that might make you feel strapped. If you have a large loan balance that you're paying off for a very, very long time, as well as other financial obligations that aren't going anywhere anytime soon, you might want the security of a fixed rate loan. It just gives you the peace of mind and protection against any future rate hikes. If you've chosen a variable interest rate, you're not completely screwed if the rate starts creeping up beyond a level you're comfortable with. You can always refinance down the road and lock in a fixed rate. When refinancing, you might want to consider adding a cosigner to your loans. A cosigner is someone who puts their creditworthiness against your loan application. They're essentially backing you up. They're putting themselves on the line for repayment in the event that you're unable to pay back your loan. Adding a cosigner might help you qualify for a loan that you otherwise wouldn't have qualified for. It can also help you secure a lower interest rate. If you're gonna add a cosigner to your loan, you're gonna wanna pick someone with a strong credit and a healthy income. And it's not a decision you should make lightly. Adding a cosigner is a pretty big responsibility. If you miss a payment, it's not just your credit that takes a hit, your cosigner's does too. And in the event of your unlikely passing, your cosigner will still be on the hook for your loans. Unlike government loans, which are forgiven upon death, private loans don't get wiped away. If you want to protect your cosigner from liability in the event that you pass away before your loans are paid off, you can look into a term life insurance policy with a duration that lines up with the repayment term of your loan. For example, if you have a co-signed loan with a 10-year repayment term, you could take out a 10-year term policy with a coverage amount equal to your loan balance. Or, If you're offered life insurance through your employer, you might want to list your co-signer as your beneficiary until your loans are paid off. Heavy shit, I know.
Mama said it wasn't gonna be easy. Yeah.
Loan forgiveness is a hotly debated topic. Is it worth applying for? Will the programs go away? Does the benefit even work in your favor in the first place? There's a lot to sift through before you decide whether or not it's worth it. Loan forgiveness means that your loan balance will no longer be your responsibility once you meet the eligibility requirements. Some loan forgiveness programs wipe your balance clean, while others leave you with a sneaky tax liability. We'll talk about this more in a second. This is worth thinking about when you're deciding whether to pursue loan forgiveness in the first place. The main loan forgiveness programs are public service loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment forgiveness. There are also career-specific loan forgiveness programs, such as those for teachers, nurses, and lawyers, as well as state-sponsored programs. Each of these have their own eligibility requirements and nuances. If you have high student loan debt, and if you're planning to work in a lower-paying field, these programs are definitely worth looking into. Some, like income-based repayment, will treat your forgiven amount of debt like taxable income in the year that it's forgiven. For example, let's say you have $8,000 worth of student loan debt that gets forgiven via an income-based repayment program this year. That $8,000 will now get treated by the government as income you earned this year, meaning you'll have to pay tax on it. So if you're thinking about applying for a program like income-based repayment, you're gonna wanna do the math first. Sometimes the projected tax liability will have you on the hook for way more money than if you had just refinanced and stuck with the standard repayment plan. I can remember one Henry who has about $300,000 in student loans and is on an income-based repayment plan. This keeps her monthly payments low, which is great, but it also means that her debt is growing significantly because of the interest rate. Because of how large her loan balance is, her payments are actually going towards interest and never actually touch the principal. Down the road, when she's eligible for loan forgiveness, her loan balance will have grown from the original amount of about $300,000 to over $1.3 million. That means her tax liability in that year will be somewhere around $500,000, which, by the way, is on the low end of what a managing director at an investment bank makes per year. Just some food for thought. I have a few more pieces of advice to drop on you before we finish up this chapter. Some student loan providers, including both federal and private lenders, will offer you a discount on your interest rate if you set up automatic payments directly from your checking account. It's usually about 0.25%. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually could save you hundreds or even thousands of dollars over time. It's worth calling your lender to see if they offer this option. While you're on the phone with them, ask them about prepayment penalties. Some lenders, typically private lenders, will charge a penalty if you start throwing extra money at your loan. So before you do, just make sure you won't be hit with extra costs. If you can make larger payments without penalty and you plan on doing so, you also need to tell your lender one more thing. Tell them that when you make payments greater than what's required, you want that extra money to be applied towards your principal balance. If you don't do this, the lender will put it wherever they want to, which is usually towards fees and interest. When that happens, you won't see your balance decreasing the way you expect it to when you make a larger payment. A quick phone call to state your preference can make all the difference. Keep in mind that if you make overpayments on your loans, your lender may adjust your payment due date to reflect that you're all caught up and then some. This can trick you into thinking that you don't owe anything for a while, which technically you don't, but if you were making excess payments to get ahead, ignore the adjusted payment due date and keep paying on your regular schedule. Oh, and one last thing. People often ask if going back to school to get an advanced degree like an MBA or a master's is worthwhile from an ROI perspective. There's really no right answer to this. If getting a degree will increase your earning potential by more than the degree costs you, maybe it's worth it. But if getting the degree is personally important to you, then it might be worth getting even if it never pays for itself. Not every big expenditure can be judged by how much money it brings back to you.
Hi, I'm Michael Brown, out here on the mean streets of New York trying to find out just how good at saving money New Yorkers really are. This is Benny for Your Thoughts.
Oh, I'm feeling
How many people say, oh, I never left New York? How many people do that? I never been on a plane. You ever encounter people like that?
Yeah.
I've been in New York my whole life. Never been on a plane. They don't set goals for themselves, you know? You gotta, and this is a goal-oriented world. So, it's important.
Did somebody's debt ever factor into your relationship? Would there be a number cap of when you're like, I actually got to bounce?
No, as long as it doesn't affect me personally.
I don't think it'd be too big of an issue as long as you're working towards it.
Yes, only if they're irresponsible with their money.
I guess I would if the debt would really like threaten my life, I guess.
Right, you want to keep all your fingers. So for $100, would you mind if we asked a little bit more invasive questions?
Sure.
What's your credit card balance right now?
So it's higher than normal. So it's about $3,400. Oh, well, it's gonna be higher.
Probably like 1,000.
1,500.
Like 6,000, but that's all expensed. So
$187.